Good afternoon. It is the Friday edition of Metro Business Week coming to you live on Metro TV. My name is Winston Taki. Here we say facts and figures made simple. We are coming to you live on channel 277 on DSTV and across all our social media handles. This is the award-winning show proudly brought to you by Star Assurance, your solid partner. Today on the show, we'll be touching on the Belt and Road Initiative, that is China's whole project infrastructure development. There's been an increasing conversation that it is a taking over of world trade by China against the West. What is the debate and what is the position of Africa in terms of development? So these and more we'll be dealing here today on the show. Stay tuned. We take a short break. When we come back, we dive straight to the conversation with my guests here in studio and one joining us straight from South Africa for a very insightful discussion. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Metro Business Week live on Metro TV. This is a award-winning show where we bring you insight across industries. If you are an ardent viewer of this program, you understand that the emphasis has always been on ensuring sustainable development. This time around, we are focusing on China's Belt and Road Initiative. There's a whole agenda to transform the continent of China and ensure China's position in terms of trade is solidified. But that's not the case alone, but ensuring that other Africa, Asia, the West, and some related connectivities with regards to this trade are well enhanced. And we'll be having this conversation here shortly. But before we do that, I just want you to know that Star Assurance has launched another innovative product, that is the Star Motor Third Party Extra, which aims to transform third-party motor insurance in Ghana. This policy is a notable departure from the traditional restrictions of third-party policies, which typically only cover liability for damage and injuries caused by the policyholder to the third parties. The new Star Motor Third Party Extra policy provides coverage for glass damage encompassing windscreens, side mirrors, window glasses, vent glasses, sunroofs, and inside rear view mirrors of the vehicle of the policyholder. Pay as little as 100 Ghana cedi in addition to your standard motor third party premium to enjoy this extra cover. Terms and conditions apply. Star Assurance, your solid partner. The Africa's infrastructure development is a very formidable agenda. We've been calling for a widespread conversation on this, and today we are having it here on the show. We'll be joined on Zoom directly from South Africa by Mekatekiso Kubayi. He's the researcher at the Institute of Global Dialogue at UNISA from South Africa. But we have here in studio one of my expert panelists in the person of Paul Frimpong. He is the Executive Director for Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. We will also be joined by our audience who are live with us in studio, who will share their insight as well on what they think they believe is the best route to ensuring Africa's sustainable development, especially in terms of infrastructure, well advanced. So I'd like to welcome my gentlemen and ladies to Metro Business Week. It's good to have you all here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me go to my key person here in studio. First of all, many, for instance, are watching us today, and for the first time, they may be hearing the BRI for the first time. Some already are quite conversant with this conversation. First of all, enlighten us. When we say the Belt and Road Initiative, especially from China, what is it about? Is it a global agenda to take over the world, or what is what's the mistake around it?
Yeah, so it's a very important question, because obviously if you track some of the global happenings, especially in the last couple of weeks, the Belt and Road Initiative has been one of the key things that has been talked about. And the Belt and Road Initiative, actually genesis started in 2013 when the president of China, Xi Jinping, announced this global initiative. Of course, first was called the One Belt, One Road, and then now it changed to the Belt and Road Initiative. So BRI is basically a global project pioneered by China, but now owned by about 160 countries across the world, to build connectivity across Asia, Europe, Africa, and some part of Latin America as well. And a key part of this connectivity is about building infrastructure, right? So when you look across most countries that have actually joined the BRI, especially those in the global development south, infrastructure bottlenecks has been one of the key challenges being identified. Okay, so for example, pick Africa as a continent. We for ourselves, in our own Agenda 2063, are aspiring to build a well-connected Africa. In fact, our very own Africa Continental Free Trade Area, its success is hinged on our ability to provide world-class infrastructure crisscrossing across the continent. So infrastructure development has been one of the key bottlenecks and challenges being identified by developing countries. And this is no big thing, because obviously if you track all the success stories of economies that have transformed, recently it's been China itself. Infrastructure development has been one of the key drivers of that transformation that we are all excited and seeing and talking about. So for Africa, we believe and we know that infrastructure bottleneck has been one of the key challenges that we are facing, and therefore we ourselves have been advocating for ourselves the means of building that connectivity, how it would be easy to sit in the train in Accra and travel all the way to Johannesburg in South Africa.
Many have the school of thoughts that while other economies were getting into war, you hear Russia, Ukraine, you hear the US going to Iraq, all those related wars, China focus on their home development and focus on the policy to advance their structure before leveraging it outside the continent. What signs did China see then to focus on infrastructure before deciding that there is a need for them to connect other African countries or the world generally?
So on that, I mean, leading to 1979, I mean, China was running what we call a closed economy. So we have already been maybe head of the opening up of the Chinese economy since 1979 by then a leader called Deng Xiaoping, which started the opening up of China. So because of that process, of that strategy, they've done a lot of things that has led to that opening up. Now, if you look at Africa, we realize that for the last almost 15 years now, China has been our largest trading partner. China has been our largest investor in so many terms, in terms of the value of investment that they've done in African countries. In fact, in recent time, they even come up with some other global initiatives, right, which is the Global Development Initiative. We talk about Global Civilization Initiative, Global Security Initiative, which are all about, okay, going forward, how do we chart a new world? What kind of system can we bring out? And obviously, as economies transform and develops, like China, in the case of China, they are also required to take on global responsibilities. Okay, so it will not be the case that you are transforming, you are moving your people, millions of people out of poverty, and you're not taking on responsibilities of the rest of the world. Okay, so we've had a situation where countries like Europe has led the world during the Industrial Revolution. We've been in a system where currently, and most of the time, we've seen US leading the world in so many initiatives. In fact, our very own World Bank, US and UK were very instrumental in setting up the World Bank, and World Bank is benefiting almost all countries of the world. So the same way that China is also stepping up as a transformed economy, as a developing economy that has the expertise and experience in shaping development around the world, that they believe that if there are new ways that we can transform our world, let us all join hands to do it. So basically, that's what China has been trying to do in the opening up strategy.
Indeed, we want to understand whether, in terms of this particular development agenda, Africa has its priorities right. We have joining us on Zoom, Mekatekiso Kibayi. He's a researcher with the Institute for Global Dialogue. Good afternoon. Welcome to Metro Business.
For having me.
Great.
And hello, fellow panelists and colleagues and audience.
Amazing. Kubayi, let us understand, in terms of positioning the continent, especially Africa, in this BRI, what area of priority do you think Africa can best capitalize in terms of making sure we benefit essentially and enormously on this project?
There are two things in the main that come immediately to mind. The first one, is important because it's cross-cutting. Agency. Yeah? So it is important for African states, for African economies to exercise the necessary agency over, the trade arrangements, the contracts, negotiations, and all sorts of bilateral or multilateral arrangements that they actually make sure that they negotiate the best deal possible. For the outcomes that they seek to achieve for themselves. That's the first point. The second point here that also comes to mind is and Mr. Frimpong has alluded to it. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is by its very nature going to be infrastructure heavy, right, in terms of needs, requirements, and so on, for it to function best. It needs to be able to facilitate better movement and faster movement of both goods and peoples. Right? So that means that we need rail, we need road, we need air, we need sea, transport. So ports, railway tracks, railway stations, tarred roads, freeways and bridges and so on. Right? And then in addition to that, of course, is that we need, as we want to industrialize, we need to build infrastructure for the tools that are going to assist in that industrialization process. For instance, you need to be able to have water for either agricultural purposes or for industry, right? So you need dams, you need pipelines for water and that sort of thing. You need connectivity technology, so you need ICT infrastructure, right? Telephony, internet, broadband, at very high speeds and very wide bandwidth, and so on. So you need a whole variety of this infrastructure to be able to have a successful Africa continental free trade area. And in fact, some of these issues, such as both transport and ICT infrastructure, are two, including the Africa continental free trade area, other flagship projects of the African Union. So these are the issues that it come immediately to mind.
Right, well said. You raised very key points there when you were making your submission, that in terms of agency, we need to ensure contracts, deals, and agreements, arrangements are done well to ensure Africa benefits efficiently from some of the conversations, some of the negotiations there. But one of the issues that have been raised concerning the BRI has to do with whether Africa will benefit critically, considering the kind of offers China is offering based on this BRI. Some are saying this looks more like a debt trap. What do you make of that?
Well, it depends. It depends on the lens a person has adopted, right? Your point of view. For instance, at the Institute for Global Dialogue, we did a perception study, elite perception study, and we found, for instance, that there's actually a great section of the elites that don't even know what the BRI is. Now, you talk about, for instance, elements such as the narrative of the debt trap. But my understanding of the BRI and how it actually works is that even though it is a Chinese initiative, it is actually a project that is owned by everyone that gets involved. So you can be, take part, in the Belt and Road Initiative, but you do not have to fall, into, any sort of, debt trap. Remember, there's Chinese money, but then there's also domestic resources. So countries that negotiate and take part, in the Belt and Road Initiative also invest their own money in the project as well. So they take ownership of the project, as well, as much as China.
All right, thank you, Kubayi. We'll come back to you shortly. We are still here discussing the BRI project initiative by China and how its connectivity to other African countries, especially as well as Asia, and how it's going so far. China has been on it, and according to figures, it has contributed enormously to employment across the world, and this is a very interesting one. First of all, let me come back to Paul Frimpong to understand. He raised case about China having the money, but the resources are domestic. In that instance, with the case of Africa, where we intend to be based on the Agenda 2063 and the outlook of the economy, will we be able to accelerate to meet up with China at the pace where they are developing?
Yeah, sure. Before that, I just wanted to touch briefly on the debt-related issue, that question that you asked Kubai, right? So this narrative of debt trap diplomacy, which is being banded around, regarding China's, outward or global investments, actually has, the studies have shown that there's no elements of such debt trap in China's, foreign direct investment in terms of outward investment to countries across the world. Now, if you pick Africa, right, so if you check the debt levels of Africa combined, our debt to China is hovering around 10%, the entire continent, in the history of our debt structure as at now. Even in the case of Ghana, right, recently, of course, we've done some debt restructuring, We are doing external debt restructuring and all of that. If you check our external debt portfolio, which is about close to $30 billion, we owe China about $1.9 billion of that, which is roughly around 5% of our total external debt. But guess what the narrative has been? That we are in crisis because we owe China. Meanwhile, Ghana's debt to China is just around 5% of our total external debt, right? Again, when you talk about a debt trap, diplomacy, the narrative is that China is intentionally finding countries that they know that based on the economic structure, they cannot pay the loans that they are giving them so that they can turn around to obfuscate their asset, national asset, which is not the case. Because in most of the engagement, countries' engagement with China is recipient-driven. And that's the same model China is using at BRI, that you are the country that is supposed to approach China with the kind of project that you need, show the project viability, how the project itself is going to pay off whatever money that you're taking from them, and why our country actually going to China in the first place, because China is offering. First of all, China has the capacity to offer the kind of resources that the countries need for their development, right? If you look at around the world, the most indebted country in the world is the United States of America. Trillions of dollars in debt, right? So debt in itself is not bad, but depends on what the money is being used for. In our case, of course, we have our own challenges of corruption and bad economic management, which always leads to the place where we cannot pay our debt. But we are not even allowed to have conversations on where the monies are being used for, which is, as where we are now as a country, as a continent, we need infrastructure to unlock our economic potential.
Indeed.
And it's very expensive. So even if you're taking just one project, one real project from China, it's going to cost you billions, and that can shoot up your debt level to the highest point. But that doesn't mean that that money is going to waste, right? Because railway can be targeted in such a way that it can generate its own revenue to pay off the loan, but it's going to be in the medium to the long term before you can pay. So in the short term, your debt level might be high, and therefore they banded around as if China is doing luring countries into paying and taking up loans that they cannot pay. So I think there is.
I'll come back to you. There is this narrative about Djibouti and Sri Lanka taking loans from China, and where some of their assets were confiscated in those negotiations. But we'll come back to that. We have also joining us in studios, my special audience who are seated at the high table, probably get some insight from the Gifty. We have Gifty here, we have Shaw, we have Pat. Shaw, do you have something to tell us on this particular narrative?
Yeah, I think that it's very important that we pay attention to the happenings around us as Africans. I was really listening to my brother Paul, and I realized that the debt trap thing that is always on our mind as Africans is what, to some extent, may not sort of give us the open-mindedness to approach certain infrastructure that are coming our way. I believe that in a layman's understanding of what's happening around us, it's more about somebody has seen your need. This is what you need as a country. This is what you need as a continent. We are there to help you. Okay, so what's in it for us? You need to discuss. Whoever is receiving such help must be able to probe further to know exactly what's in it. And then if there's going to be effects in the future that's going to worry the continent, I'm sure discussions will prove those things.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Let's even bring it downwards. Let's say the case of Ghana. There's been this conversation whether the youth are involved in policy build-up stages. And you have had that conversation. I'm sure, Gifty, you've heard something like that. What is your take on that as well? Maybe you have anything to share with us? Right. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Winston. I think this is a very important conversation, particularly looking at the fact that we are in a place where we're looking at the Africa we want. I think continentally, there is an Agenda 2063 that we are looking at. And this Agenda 2063 basically talks about Africa moving from where we are as a noun to the place where we want. Now, where we want to be, what is the picture of Africa, of where we want to be, is the picture of sustainability, is the picture where the continent is economically attractive and the continent is actually thriving. And I think the conversation with the BRI even looking at the time that they were both launched, the Agenda 2063 was launched in 2013, same as the BRI. I think they celebrated 10 years this year. And you can see the direct correlation when it comes to Africa being able to achieve that agenda of where we want to be. So for me, I think the youth have been involved in a way, not in the way that we would want it to be. I think we must step up in the way the youth are being involved with this whole conversation, because I think the conversation is actually hanging at the top level, from the government to government level. So I would say that I think there should be a stepping up when it comes to trickling down to the level of the young people.
Indeed, the youth have to be involved in the conversation to ensure that when they begin to see manifestation, they can identify where the root policy is really directed from or even emanating from. But let me go back to Paul. Initially, I said that indeed this whole BRI project is a very phenomenal one, but the narrative of cases where assets of nations are confiscated in the name of certain terms and conditions not met. Let me get Paul to really address that, whether indeed that is what the reality, or if not, then what is the right narrative?
BRI,
yes.
The case of Sri Lanka, we have a similar case in even here in Africa, in Uganda. So the BRI, based on the current report that came out in the 10th anniversary, has invested in about 160 countries, involving 3,000 projects and created about 420,000 jobs. Now, the case of Sri Lanka has been cited mostly to sort of support the fact that China is the aggressor when it comes to dealing with them, and therefore, if you owe them and are not careful, they will confiscate your asset. Now, in the case of Sri Lanka, I mean, records have shown, and I think maybe your viewers can actually do their own reading on some of the publications that has come out. It showed that China has actually not seized any asset of Sri Lanka. So what happened was, when the port, it was a port that was constructed, of course, by Chinese China Harbour Group that constructed that port. Now, at the time that the government found itself in a dire situation where they are not able to meet their debt obligations, that port and all other Chinese investment in Sri Lanka amounted to around 12% of Sri Lanka's national total debt.
Okay.
About 80-something% were owned by Western and Western-linked institutions, like the World Bank, the IMF. Over that time, they have already, restructured loans upon loans to Sri Lanka over the period. Now, when the situation happened, in fact, the port's own project assessment was done by a Danish firm, not even a Chinese firm. Open for bidding, Chinese firm won the bid, constructed the port. Now, there were challenges in terms of the debt crisis. Now, the government decided to offload, sort of sell the assets of that port to be able to pay their debt. The first country that were approached, of course, India is a big investor in Sri Lanka, were India, and of course, I think Japan also. None of them were able to come up to actually pay the amount of money that Sri Lanka needs so that they can be able to pay off the debt that's becoming too much, crippling the economy. And the Chinese company came with the support of China Exim Bank to pay that loan amount, $1.something billion to the Sri Lankan government, to be able to now take off that debt that they owe. Right? So it was not a case of, I built the port, you can pay me, I'm coming back to take over the port. No, it was a bit of the country being in a fix. They try all means. They're looking for a partner that can take over, and another Chinese company came over to take over to be able to give the government that money and the space that they need to be able to pay off that. That's the case. Even recently, again, even in Africa here, there's an airport extension project in Uganda called Entebbe International Airport.
Yeah.
Again, it came out that the report that China is going to take over the airport if the government is not able to pay the debt it owes to China for that airport expansion, because according to the contract, that is what is stated. But when you look at the contract and the discussion around it, it shows that no, it was just cash, to be placed in an escrow every other period. So in case you default on paying the loan that we owe, you will take over that cash that has been placed in escrow, and which is typical of every international financing project. So even private companies that are funding private projects across, that's how it does. So there's an escrow where every time, every month, every quarter, there's a portion of money that is being put in the escrow. So in case there's a default, not to come and take the asset, but to take over that cash, that has been placed in escrow. That's the conversation happening.
We have that in Ghana.
Yeah, exactly. So almost all projects, exactly. That's what happened. So basically, that has been the case of China's, so when they cite the Sri Lanka situation, it's not actually true that China has confiscated Sri Lanka assets because they're not able to pay them.
I think that is well answered there. You're watching Metro Business Week live on Metro TV. We are coming to you live as well. If you have your mobile phones, you can go on Facebook, on our Facebook page on Metro TV Ghana, and subscribe to our page. All programs and activities will be coming to your phone directly in case of notifications if you hit the notification button there. Now, we'll go straight to South Africa, back to Kubayi, who is a researcher with the Institute of Global Dialogue, to get insights. Kubayi, are you still with us, Kubayi?
Yes, Martin, I'm here.
Great. In this conversation, how do you think Africa can maximize their opportunity in terms of technology with regards to the BRI China's project?
Okay. Thank you for that question. But to begin to respond to that question, maybe to also add to what Mr. Frimpong said on the debt trap. So it's true that there's a lot of data and research that has been done, even by European or Western think tanks, universities, other researchers there, and that conclusively find that actually Africa's debt is still predominantly held by Western lenders, right? Not even China. So the issue of the Chinese debt trap is a very interesting one. We're considering the numbers and the facts on hand. So question is, why is it that when China comes in and wants to trade, finance projects on African soil, it's debt trap, but when it's a Western firm, it's not debt trap, and so on. So some of these things have to be considered quite carefully and thoroughly. Now, on
Technology transfer.
Excuse me?
On technology transfer and maximizing the opportunities the BRI provides.
Now, maximizing the opportunities the BRI provides, make it very possible. For instance, Africa, and someone said earlier, there's the Agenda 2063. Now, the Agenda 2063 Africa We Want also has 15 flagship projects. ICT, digital infrastructure, road, rail, healthcare, and so on and so forth. In some of the research that we're doing, we ended up, categorizing the Belt and Road Initiative, into about 4 or 5, Belt and Road Initiative, like the health, road, the health Silk Road, the ICT Silk Road, and so on and so forth. So there are many avenues there. Now, we already know that China is particularly strong in technological development. They're highly technologically advanced right now. In fact, they're just about to be the global leaders in technology development and so on.
Okay.
So there's an obvious area there of complementarity, to be able to leverage and take advantage, of the technological, prowess. For instance, you've got, multilateral forums such as the G20 that constantly talk about technology transfers and so on. You've got the BRICS, that have been talking about technology transfers and so on. You have Chinese firms, you have Chinese researchers, you have Chinese engineers, and so on, who would, be able to facilitate, some of the technological transfer, particularly in lieu of the agenda to localize development, to localize production. So if we want to improve, for instance, our access to global value chain and even develop a solid regional value chain, we have to access, some of the technologies, and China is a very good partner to be able to get some of that, technological capability, to assist us to get some of that technological capability we need, in order to achieve our ends. So there's plenty of opportunity, for that. Sometimes, some states, would offer, instead of money, they would offer capacity or technical, assistance, right? Sometimes, they would offer financial assistance. Sometimes it would be, in the form of trade, concessions. Sometimes it would be, so there are various, ways with which to arrange, some of these relationships. Like I said earlier, the very first point, agency. So, for instance, you are able to go to China and say to China that, look, these are our national priorities. We need to achieve 1, 2, 3. Right? We need, to develop or train so many engineers. We need to develop and train so many doctors. We need to develop and train so many artisans, etc., right?
Okay.
And you have the capacity or the technical
Kubai.
know-how, and so on. How can you actually come on board and assist us in this regard?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kubai. You raised very serious issues there, and you've addressed them in your submission. A case where these companies, especially Chinese companies who come to countries across Africa, bring their own technical persons to probably build an infrastructure. But Africa's main narrative has been the challenge of how ensuring those infrastructures are kept in best conditions and ensure they are sustained consistently with the right technical know-how. But because of time, let me get probably some few takes from Paul Pong here with me in studio before we get to another segment of the program. Paul, now he has addressed the case of technical transfer. Now, as we're going forward, what position should Africa ready themselves at in order to ensure that when the project gets to certain parts of the continent, we can have our resources ready to support the advancement?
We have to, African government need to be strategic about the kind of project that we seek funding for. We have to choose economic expediency over political expediency. Right? We have to ensure that the project that we are submitting for funding are actually viable by itself. Okay, because these are capital intensive projects that we are talking about. So if you're going in for $500 million, $1 billion to do a project, you must understand that this has to be economically viable project that can pay off itself. Not because it's for a political campaign, because you made a promise in your political campaign that you're going to do something for a certain segment of your country. So by hook or crook, you're going to leverage on the country's economy to be able to get money from anywhere you can to be able to do those projects. That cannot be the case, because as it stands now, what we talk about is not just infrastructure, we call it critical infrastructure. So at this point of our stage of economic development, what are the critical infrastructures that we need as a country that can leapfrog us to the next phase of our economic journey, development journey? So if you can answer that question honestly, based on economic experience, not based on political experience, I believe that we will be able to present the best foot forward. Trust me, almost every country around the world wants to invest in Africa because of the nature of returns that you can gain from Africa. Of course, we sit on almost every natural resource you can think of in the world. It's in Africa. Almost every country on the continent of Africa has something to offer in terms of natural resources and all of that. So it makes that investment attractive. But of course, it behooves on us to do the right homework and present the viable project that we believe when we get this funding for, they can actually pay themselves off.
Amazing. Let me get to my audience here in studio to ask, okay, before we do that, I just want you to know that Star Assurance is still a most reliable insurance policy holder in Ghana now. So if you want to buy a Star policy, just know that Star Assurance and Total Energies are bringing you unparalleled convenience. Now at over 267 Total filling stations nationwide, you can renew or buy a Star Motor Third Party, Star Motor Third Party Extra, or Star Motor Comprehensive Insurance policy and get free fuel instantly. But that's not all. You can also lodge your Star Motor Assurance claims at these stations, available 24/7 on weekends and on holidays. For more information, you can call the toll-free line on 0800 177 177 on all networks. The numbers are 0800 177 177 or on all networks. Star Assurance, indeed, your solid partner. We take a break. When we come back, I'll take few comments from my audience here in studio. Then we'll bring you more here on Metro Business Week. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the award-winning show, the Metro Business Week, coming to you live on Metro TV. We're also live on channel 277 DSTV. Now, the conversation about the Belt and Road Initiative has been quite insightful if you're watching us. But let me take a few takes here with my panelists here in studio. We spoke to Initial Paul Frimpong, and also joining us from South Africa, Kubai, who was sharing very, very deep insight with us here on the show. But let me speak to Patience, who is here as one of our audience. She has something to take with us. Right?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I believe this BRI initiative is a good opportunity for Africans. We only need to change our mindsets and then also set our priorities right, because we need to fix our government issues. With that, I think this initiative is a very good initiative. And also, I believe there should be more education about this whole BRI initiative for people to get to know about this initiative. With that, we can change Africa. And then for Africa, I don't think people can change, or other countries can change Africa for us. We can change Africa ourselves, and it starts from the mind. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. It starts from the mind, the mindset, and your mind can best change when you're more informed, and that is a very good one from Patience here. And let me take some closer remarks from Kubai, who is on Zoom. Kubai, if you can hear me, your last words, please. Make it brief for us.
There are definitely opportunities to take advantage of in the Belt and Road Initiative. They require, careful prioritization, careful planning, and proper agency by African partners, of the Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah, there are many possibilities there for complementarities with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, as well as potential benefit, for the localization and industrialization agenda for the continent.
We are indeed.
I hope all is done well. Thank you.
You've done amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll surely be following up with you in our subsequent conversation. Paul Frimpong?
For Africans, what we are aspiring for is to transform our continent. So we are pro-development. In this case, we have to be positioned to work with almost any country that we believe their interests aligns with our interests. In this case, the Belt and Road Initiative is about infrastructure development. Africa, we've been talking about infrastructure development for centuries. Currently, if you check the data from the African Development Bank, we need between $130 billion to $170 billion each year for the next 20 or so years before we can even bridge the kind of infrastructure gap that we have on the continent. So that is a huge amount of money that we need. In fact, for African ourselves, we set up what we call Africa 50 Infrastructure Development Fund. In a year, they're able to do about $6 billion or so of projects. We are talking about $130 billion a year. So the gap is huge. So therefore, we're looking for partners, whether it's from UAE, from Saudi, from India, from China, from the US. Of course, we want to transform our economy. And I believe that with that kind of vision and priority that we have, we can work with almost any country that can help us. Yeah.
Paul Frimpong is Executive Director for Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. We were also joined on Zoom from South Africa. Mekatekisod Kubayi is the researcher with the Institute for Global Dialogue at UNISA. And I would like to also thank my audience, studio audience, who have also joined us today to have an amazing experience here on Metro Business Week, the award-winning show. I'd like to also thank you all for coming. Don't miss the Monday edition, which will be coming to you same time at 1 p.m., where we'll be focusing on the 2024 budget. What are your expectations? And it's going to be quite a serious conversation. Make sure you mark your date, your calendar, and you will not miss it. The show is proudly brought to you by Star Assurance, your solid partner. My name is Winston Taki. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the rest of our programs. Up next is Good Afternoon Ghana with Annie Ifua Ampafo. Have a good day.